Hello, everyone, and welcome in to the Crowded Booth on a Monday night. We appreciate you tuning in. I'm glad you're here as we get ready to talk college football. A lot of different things we're discussing on tonight's show. It's right now just going to be me solo rocking the show, but hey, get your comments in, like the video. Monday night, wild week of college football, week 5. That and more on tonight's episode of the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
All right, let's lock it in and let's talk college football here on a Monday evening. Thank you so much for joining. And once again, this is the Crowded Booth, a weekly college football show on nearly daily now that we kind of do, obviously, talking college football live on Monday and Wednesdays. You can catch different excerpts of that over on our YouTube channel. Make sure you subscribe to that as well. And then, obviously, too, we talk a lot of different things as well. Georgia Tech mixed in with a couple other teams that we do special episodes with different guests. Shout out Palmer Toms, our guest last week. Gonna get choked up. Palmer's a good friend of the show. Once again, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Shout out to Bet Online, our presenting sponsor. And a big week. It really is a big week for the people that put together the spreadsheets. Dr. Bob got to put a W in the column for our good friend and co-host Will Mannis. Ralph Leary and I taking another L, so Will inching closer. I'm 2-4. I believe Ralph is 3-2, and Will's now 1-5. So there's life. There is life to be had in Will Mannis's spreadsheet column. That's what it is. A couple comments. Let's get right here to it. GT Faithful says, "Go Braves." Also, guys, if you could keep the chat about how amazing the UGA Bama game down to 15 minutes, that'd be great. Josh Pace gussed about it for what seemed like an eternity. Clayton said he's waiting. Gavin said 8:34. When UGA Bama was the game of the year, it's far it's going to be talked about. Alex, unfortunately, says that he has to unsubscribe. Someone who's late all the time is worth my sub. He can't handle it. He goes, "I don't care about being talked about. I care that I can walk away for 30 minutes and still be on the same subject." He did not walk away. It's too early in the stream to be getting emotional, Bryce. That is true. Give me 1 second. I got emotional. You know what's also just terrible? Will's internet. Everyone catch a load of this. Will can't connect to the internet over there in Columbus, Georgia, and it's hurting him. It's hurting him, But GT Faithful, I will tell you, we are going to open up the show, and we're going to talk about this game. Georgia and Alabama. What are my takeaways? Let's get into that. What are the takeaways from this ball game? What are the overarching themes? Look, we know Ryan Williams is 17 years old. They said enough in the broadcast. They said enough in leading up to the game. I was a part of an article for CBS Sports and 24/7 Today talking about Ryan Williams. And yes, we all know he's 17 years old, reclassified. It's been discussed. It's been ad nauseum talked about. So we know that. But here's kind of my big takeaway. And it's probably something that we knew, but I don't know if it's necessarily something that we remembered heading into this game. Jalen Milroe and this Alabama offense is nearly unguardable. Now, Georgia made adjustments in that second half, but Jalen Milroe and this Alabama offense, when they're clicking, I don't know if there's a defense in the country that can stop them. Will, I really wanted to be on the show because I wanted him to talk about this. There's questions still remains that Jalen Milroe in this Alabama offense, and Jalen Milroe in specifically, we know Will's an Auburn fan, but that Jalen Milroe specifically is not necessarily a quarterback in the terms of he's not an elite passer. But what Jalen Milroe does do is improvise, create, and make plays. And for a 20 to 25 minutes into that ball game, nobody could stop them. And this Alabama offense was the most dominant unit on the field. And you're talking about a Alabama defense that made a Georgia offense that's pretty good look pedestrian. So one of my biggest takeaways is it doesn't matter what you think about when you talk about Jalen Milroe as a quarterback. He's one of the best playmakers in college football. He's one of the best playmakers in this sport. Regardless of what you think about his ability to layer passes, his ability to throw the ball, his ability to accurately hit the intermediate to short routes, whatever you want to talk about it, he is a playmaker. He is someone that is a headache for opposing coordinators and defensive coaches to game plan and scheme against. And for 20 to 25 minutes on Saturday, Georgia looked like an FCS defense. So, and Will says this, and Will puts a comment in here. He said it's hard to keep saying that Milroe isn't good when he keeps making all these plays and winning games because a ton of big time recruits were there. Juju Lewis wanted to keep on an eye on for Bama. To Will's point, we can sit here and talk about, well, he's not a polished quarterback. He doesn't have a great whatever you're talking. He's winning ball games, and he is by far the best playmaker on the field when he steps on the field. That's just what he is, and you can have a lot of conversations. Look, Alabama has to figure out what happened in the second half. I will say this: there's probably maybe 2 to 3 other teams that could do what Georgia did in the second half, make adjustments, and come back in that ball game. I think Texas is one. Ohio State might be one. The jury's still out on that. Outside of those, it's really a crapshoot of where you could go with some other teams. Maybe Tennessee could. So credit to Georgia. They came back in this ball game. They fought. That's what championship caliber teams are able to do. Not a lot of teams could do that. But for me, the storyline is coming out is that when you have a quarterback like Jalen Milroe, a player in that position, your goal is to surround him with so much talent that any deficiency or shortcoming that he might have is completely masked by his ability to play within your system. And he has such great weapons around him that none of it matters. And that's where Alabama is. I mean, the offensive firepower that this team has is ridiculous. The offensive firepower they have around him, not even including number 4, is wild. Ryan Williams, unbelievable football player. But this is incredible when we talk about what he's been able to do. And look, I have been, critical of Milroe in the terms of, thinking, hey, he's a great athlete. He can make plays. But what is he as a quarterback? New coordinator, new coaching staff, new culture. And it's still the same, but different. He went out there and dominated. He won football games. And they looked like the best team in college football for 25 to 30 minutes. Now, obviously, Jalen Milroe, that's the big topic. Also want to kind of flow into this. Bama's still Bama. If you were expecting a massive drop off, first off, I don't know what you were smoking. And second, a massive drop off of Bama wouldn't really happen until maybe year 3 of Kalen DeBoer, in my opinion. Kalen DeBoer is a winner. We talked about that back in January, what he could bring to the table when this hire was made. What would this look like? For me, Kalen DeBoer is a winner. And right now, he's winning with elite players. They're not all of his guys necessarily, but he's winning with elite players. We'll see what happens when it comes to, his recruiting, which they still do very well in, when it comes to players that he has to go out and get himself and handpick and his staff has to evaluate, not just inheriting a great roster. That's the difference right now between a Ryan Day and a Kirby Smart, I would say. So Bama's still Bama. Now let's talk real quick about Georgia because we want to talk about that as well. Carson Beck struggles and then helps the comeback attempt. This is a guy who had not thrown more than 2 interceptions in 17 games that he started this year. Look, the lights were bright. Gavin says the lights were too bright for a check down Beck. I think Carson Beck's still one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the country. This is a guy who, in terms of talent-wise, for one game against probably a top 5 defense in the country, he didn't play well. If that's the measure and we're saying that's not good and you're trash or you're a fraud, then everyone is bad and no one is good. And because nobody's succeeding in that situation outside of a Milroe, outside of some otherworldly talent. So we'll see. I mean, Georgia, it was a nightmare situation, a nightmare scenario for the first 15 to 20 minutes of that game, heading to the halftime, obviously with the score being what it was, could not have gone worse. Could not have gone worse. The ability to bounce back cannot be manipulated. It cannot be overstated. That's a big thing for them. Obviously, the 12-team playoff plays a role into that. I think it also looked good better from an optics standpoint. Uh, Georgia's still a very good football team. They've got to figure some things out because if that happens again, if it happens on the road at Texas, on the road at Ole Miss, at home against Tennessee, you may not be able to climb out of that hole and make it close. Because regardless of whether you like it or not, a lot of this is about making it close. Georgia making that game close looks better when the playoff committee looks at that resume. They'll remember, they will remember what obviously happened in the first half, but they'll also remember Georgia coming back in the football game. So I don't know. Also, Georgia's defense made some great adjustments. Kirby Smart talked about this post game. Wasn't as aggressive in the second half. That probably helped. You know, a lot of people talk about Milroe. You've got to get in his face. Well, he seems to be a guy that can not just beat a three-man pass rush, but he can also create out of chaos. And that's something he did a lot of against Georgia. The big play that stands out to me was Christian Miller, the defensive tackle, defensive lineman for Georgia, went high on a sack attempt, missed it, and Milroe obviously makes a play out of it. He creates out of chaos. I think that's something that Jalen Milroe does so well. And then the question has to be asked, obviously, with this too: are these the best two teams? I'm hesitant to make any kind of claim of that heading into Week 6. These are two really good football teams. This was if you're a casual college football observer with no dog in the fight, no pun intended, then this was a great football game. This is an all-time classic in terms of what you wanted to see. When you want to see the best of the best, go against the best of the best. And I will say this, look, I cover LSU. I've been at Auburn. I've been in Sanford Stadium. I've been at Williams-Brice. I've been in Neyland. When you talk about some of the best environments, Alabama's an underrated one. They may not show up for the Western Kentuckys of the world, but when it's prime time in Bryant-Denny Stadium, that place is as hard as any place in the country to go win a football game. It is. You have to experience it to understand it. So were these the two best teams? I'm hesitant to put anything on that right now. What I will tell you is that that's two playoff teams, and that's probably round one, maybe round two. I won't say round three quite yet, but those are two good football teams. I'm not going to tell you it's the best two teams in the country because I think Texas is legitimate, and I think Tennessee's a pretty good football team. I'm not ready to crown anybody after a big win because, like I've preached on this show and our other shows as well, you cannot get too emotionally high or too emotionally low based off of 1 week. The team we're going to be talking about next is a perfect example of that. But what you can do is say, okay, here's a data point. Here's a data point. When we group those together, and we're into week 6 of college football, you can start to kind of use some of those data points to form an opinion on what this team might be. But for a Saturday in September, I think it would be crazy to put labels on these two teams right now. Crazy, because there's still a lot of football left to be played, especially for Georgia in the SEC slate. So that's Georgia, Alabama. Massive game, a fun watch. Obviously, Ralph, shout out to Ralph. He's, I think, still working tonight, and he came to Baton Rouge. We left the LSU game, which was a bloodbath, at halftime to kind of take in the final moments of that Georgia-Alabama game. All right, quick break. Let's get some water real quick. Quick swig. Let's talk Ole Miss. I said when Georgia went to Lexington, a lot of people had looked at that South Carolina-Kentucky game, and they saw the final score, and they made a lot of judgment calls off of what Kentucky was. Well, when you go back and look at that, it was a lot of chaos created by a South Carolina defense that's going to be playing Ole Miss this upcoming week and is a very, very good front seven. But it's a unit in general that created so much chaos that the final score looked more lopsided than it probably should have. So when we talk Ole Miss here, okay, when we look at what Ole Miss might be, and let's get this right here. The question is Ole Miss okay? Are the Rebels and Lane Kiffin, is it the same story every year where they stump their own toe and they fall short of what we in the media and we in the podcast world and the professional media world, where we label them as? I thought this was a team that could make it to Atlanta. I still believe that. I thought it was a team that could finish in the top 4 of the country. I still believe that. I'm not going to make some rash judgment off of one game because I will tell you this too. Kentucky has a great defense. That's a really, really good group. Jamon Dumas Johnson has helped them, excuse me, has helped them immensely in the middle of the defense. Deion Walker is an All American candidate. And for 60 minutes on Saturday, Kentucky played what I believe was well above what they needed to do. The defense controlled the line of scrimmage, and Ole Miss, who really had not been tested in just in terms of the competition level, we saw the competition level jump up for the Rebels, and they struggled. And so Kentucky looks good. They've got some things to figure out offensively here. I like this is, but this I like what they can do. Brock Vandegrift, we'll see how he develops throughout the season. But this is a Mark Stoops type of game. Am I right? Like this is a game where Mark Stoops comes in and he's just salivating because he knows when he sees this final box score, he sees how the game is played, and maybe Mark Stoops ish in terms of way went for it and got aggressive. That's when you're able to sit there and say, okay, this is what Kentucky can be. Now, on the flip side, does this mean that Ole Miss, Jackson Dart, they're frauds? What? No, I'm not going to overreact to 1 week. I'm just telling you that you have, like I said, you have to individually look at things. You cannot just, we can gather data points and we may believe something that we think something we believe to be true, but in all cases, it might not be true. And so is Ole Miss offensively, as bad as they played on Saturday? No, this is still one of the higher, more potent offenses in the country. And look, they're going to visit Columbia this upcoming weekend. I'm going to have eyes on that one because the very next week, you talk about what we didn't think would be a gauntlet, could be one for Ole Miss. You play at home against Kentucky. You've lost that one. Now you go to Columbia, South Carolina, which outside of that fan base in Columbia, no one really had a firm idea of what they might be. And now defensively, we know that they're a pretty stout group. They've got some things to figure out offensively. We'll have to see, what they look like. And just in terms of Lenora Sellers being the quarterback, that's going to be a hostile environment. Can their tackles handle Kyle Kennard on one side and the other young man on the other side? His name escapes me, Dylan Stewart. I mean, that's legitimate NFL talent on both sides of the defensive line. So that's going to be something that's going to be another test. And is it a bounce back game? I don't know what the line on that game early wise is, but is that a bounce back game for Ole Miss on the road? Because then the very next week you have to come and play LSU, which regardless of what your opinion of LSU has been, and I've watched them in person almost all season, coming down to Death Valley is a whole different animal. So it's going to be very, very, very interesting. I think, going to be interesting to see. Alex says Kentucky did the same thing they did to Georgia, but Ole Miss isn't the level to win that kind of game, unlike Georgia. Essentially, Alex, what you're saying here is you think Georgia's a tier above Ole Miss, and that's a fair point. Ole Miss isn't as battle tested in terms of their head coach being able to go through situations like this and be on the winning end. I will equate it to a team we'll talk about later in the show. If you're going to be a championship contender, you're going to have ugly games. Every single year we have seen the national title contender, the national title winner, the four teams in the playoff have to go through some slog of a game where it's not pretty, but they leave with a win. Ole Miss failed that test on Saturday. If they fail it again, they may not get another chance, but they failed that test on Saturday. Dr. Bob says Ole Miss isn't man enough to win in Tiger Stadium, bringing out the manly card there. And then Maxwell says he apologizes for being late. That's okay. Dr. Bob also says that Deion Walker is a top 15 pick in the middle of the Kentucky defense. He gave Georgia problems all day. He's a handful. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that a lot of people are waiting to jump into the portal, Dr. Bob. Deion Walker is that guy, and he didn't. Kentucky kept him. He's an All-American. Look, Kentucky's constantly putting out defensive guys into the NFL, by the way, if you haven't looked. Alex says, I think Ole Miss is a playoff caliber team. I think Georgia, Texas, Bama, and Ohio State are just a tier above. That's a completely fair point. Alex, I wouldn't even say I disagree with you. Maxwell does say, but I must say this for Will and Gavin, absolute boomer. It is what it is. Bryce, if every game this week was played 9 more times, would the loser win 9 times? No, that's not right. That was a loser statement, and I'm not going to talk about that because we'll let Will, if he can get in tonight, talk about that. But Ole Miss, Kentucky has a stout defense. This is, I also kind of said this in the last point on Ole Miss. It's never as good as you think it is. It's never as bad as you think it is. Kentucky humbled Ole Miss on Saturday, But Ole Miss isn't the team that's averaging whatever they were averaging, going up to Wake Forest, making a team literally pay you out, buy you out to not play. They're also not as bad as they looked on Saturday. They're somewhere in between. Lane Kiffin's mark on this year's program, on this year's version of Ole Miss, will be how close can we get it to what we were the first 3 to 4 games of the season, not what we were last Saturday. And that'll be something to kind of watch and kind of, look at as well. Donna Bob says that Ole Miss, Penn State, and Oregon are kind of that second tier. Tennessee's in tier 1.5. We're going to take a quick break. Once again, solo show tonight. When we come back, we will be taking a look outside the SEC and going into the Big 12. A big one down in Orlando was a statement made by Deion Sanders in Colorado. That and more here on the Crowded Booth. Hey, everyone. Bryce Koon here with the Crowded Booth, and I'm excited to partner with Milton and Drew McCluskey as they get on their new venture, the Cajun Cousins Company. It's an all-stop shop for some of the best food and atmosphere entertainment that you're going to be able to have, especially this fall as college football is right around the corner. What is Cajun Cousins Company? Well, Milt decided to start this business back in Columbia, South Carolina. That's where they're based out of. Drew initially joined him after spending some time with the Saints, but they offer catered Cajun delicacies such as crawfish boils and Aunt Dottie's jambalaya. They bring everything and they can set up anywhere. Look, folks, they're passionate about giving people a reason to gather and to get to the culture that they love so much. They're expanding that brand to the low country of South Carolina, the upstate area, and other areas of the Southeast. So look, if you're going to throw that tailgate party or you're going to have a big gathering, reach out to Cajun Cousins Company today over at CajunCousinsCO.com to get that quote. Tell them the Crowded Booth sent you. We can't wait to see what they have in store this fall. Back here on the Crowded Booth, my name is Bryce Koon. Make sure you check out Cajun Cousins. They've also got this hot sauce that is to die for. We are going to get them to cater an event in Atlanta pretty soon. Let's talk. We've talked SEC. We're going to talk ACC, but I did want to give credit where credit's due. A lot of people don't love this program. A lot of people kind of have harped on it. And look, this little line of blurb that you see below my face right here is going to mislead a lot of people when we talk about Colorado. We talk about the Big 12. Colorado hammers UCF. This was a game and team in UCF that was amongst one of the best in the country in running the football. We obviously see what they've done with the combination of RJ and KJ in the backfield, Gus Malzahn. But Will warned people. Will said this is the kind of game that Gus Malzahn will lose. Riding high, emotional win the previous weekend. You get home, you feel good about it. You're the favorites, and you get blown off the field. This is probably the most complete win that we have seen out of Colorado in terms of against a worthy opponent in quite some time. And so, look, for all the heckling or all of the criticism that people point towards Colorado and Deion Sanders, and some of it's well warranted, you also have to give credit where credit's due. Deion Sanders and Colorado went into a tough atmosphere. Bounce House is a tough place to play, and they went and won a football game pretty handedly. Travis Hunter, I tweeted this out Saturday night. People didn't agree. They might disagree. I want to get your thoughts. Travis Hunter and Jalen Milroe right now, to me, are the two most electric players in college football. Maybe dynamic's the right word, but they are unbelievable at what they do. Travis Hunter had a Heisman-worthy game. It's very interesting. Alex says in the comments, Colorado definitely has something clicking. They're not the same. They're not. They're absolutely not. Dr. Bob says, if Travis Hunter plays like this the whole year, he should win the Heisman. Otherwise, the award is a fraud. GT Faithful says Colorado has got the talent they need. We'll see if they can keep up. To that point, to all of your points, the trenches for Colorado has progressed enough to where we should have to have a conversation about what would it look like in terms of the Big 12 title odds. So I don't think that Colorado right now for me is a Big 12 title contender. You have to have the conversation because, okay, the big win on Saturday, I understand that. I get that. But what we also need to kind of be understanding here is that, and I want to go back to this. Let's go college football championship picks. No, I don't want that. Conference futures. It shifted a little bit. So let's go down to the Big 12 here per our friends at Bet Online. All right. Kansas State's the new favorite at plus 350. You've got Iowa State in there at plus 400. Colorado's still at plus 1,400. I'm not saying that they should be in the conversation. What I'm telling you is that this Big 12 conference is all over the place. Kansas State and Avery Johnson have looked really good. Iowa State plus 400 if you're into that. UCF still plus 1,000, West Virginia plus 1,200, BYU plus 1,600. Oklahoma State has slipped all the way down to plus 4,000. But Colorado has moved up. They now have the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, seventh best odds per bet online. So that's interesting. Now, Nancy says, didn't they lose to Nebraska? Yes, Nebraska obviously in the Big Ten Conference, no longer in the Big 12. We'll see. But this is why I talk about what I talk about in terms of you have to allow teams to evolve over the course of a season, because if everyone just wrote their playoff ballots in week 3, we'd be sitting here and we'd be talking about, so and so, so and so, so and so is going to be your top seeds and this, and that. This is why we play the games, folks. You have to figure it out. And look, we've fallen victim to making predictions, and I won't even say fallen victim to making predictions. Everyone does it. You think you know something about a team, and it turns out to be not just false, but really, really not true at all in the least sense of the word. So there's a lot of season left to go for college football. Colorado is a team that could be trending in the right direction. I mean, we'll have to see how they fare, but when you look at their schedule the rest of the way, not only does a bowl game feel in reach, but ladies and gentlemen, they're on a bye week this week, and then they host a de facto elimination game from the Big 12 title race, it feels like. Kansas State and Colorado. The Wildcats come to town. That is going to be must-watch TV on October the 12th, part of that slate that we thought was going to be good. This is just adding in, obviously, another game. But they play Arizona. They host Cincinnati. They go to Texas Tech. They host Utah. They're also going to play at Kansas, and then they'll end the season with a home game as they host Oklahoma State. There's a chance, obviously now, with their record, to get to a bowl game. That is considered, it has to be considered a win, but they're 4-1. They're 2-0 in the conference. They're now 2-1 on the road, and they're riding a 3-game win streak. We're not going to pump fake sunshine into the Colorado program. There's enough of that stuff kind of going around. There's enough of, arm of the athletic program or arm of Deion's army doing that itself. But I'm going to give credit where credit's due. When you criticize a program, you also have to be willing to praise them when they do well. Colorado seems a little different right now. Heading into a bye week, massive game on the other side of this. We'll see how it turns out. It's going to be very interesting. All right, now it's time for, obviously, people's favorite part of the program. The ACC. What the heck is going on in this conference? Let's start with this. A game that we were really excited to talk about, but I think turned into something way different. SMU destroys Florida State. I don't understand how in anyone's right mind we can sit here talking about DJU being the starting quarterback going forward. I know he has the injury. There's concern level that he wouldn't be able to play. All respect to somebody's injury, that cannot be the guy that plays quarterback for you if you're serious about development of your program the rest of the season. It just can't be. You've got to figure out what you want. I talked about this in the Discord today. If you want some great conversation, head over to the YouTube channel. Let's talk about this, just in general. But this is kind of where I sit with the ACC and specifically Florida State. This is a team that hit on everything they needed to in the portal a year ago. And it resulted in a historical season for, the right reasons and then obviously the wrong reasons last year. You flip it 365 days, and it's gone the exact opposite. They have completely missed in the portal. The high school recruiting hasn't been where it's needed to be. You don't have to take my word for it. You can obviously do that research on your own. They haven't developed the high school talent like they've wanted to. They've relied on the portal. So where it hit for them last year, the pendulum has swung in the opposite direction for them this season. And we see what has obviously happened. SMU, I thought they would be a talented team. It's been a roller coaster of a season, but you look at SMU right now, and I'm going to go over obviously to the ACC and look at those future odds. SMU has the 4th best odds to win the conference now at plus 800. Miami's there, Clemson's there, Louisville's there. SMU's at plus 800. We know, we've looked at their schedule. It's a relative cakewalk when you take a look at this conference. They go on the road this week at Louisville. We'll talk about that team in a second. But big win for SMU at home to christen that stadium, Gerald J. Ford Stadium, to christen that stadium with ACC play. Florida State is by far and large the biggest disappointment of college football this year. You have to have it's not a miscalculation. This is a complete and utter failure. It's a complete utter disaster. The 2024 season is, and it'll be interesting because I think that you could have gotten away with not making the playoff this year and been okay, but the way that this season's trending for Florida State, there has to be a legitimate conversation about, is Mike Norvell on the hot seat rolling into 2025? Is there, and I'm not talking about like he's got the fourth best odds to get fired. I'm talking about, is the heat turned up a little bit to where you start to have some concerns? If they start slow next year, are you too far removed? Can you really keep kind of going in that form and fashion? Give you a perfect example. Edo at LSU, perfect example. Um, Alex says SMU's offense has been amazing the last two games. Nancy says, funny how the FSU didn't want SMU in the ACC, and boom, SMU makes them look bad. No, SMU's a talented team, talented ball club. They do a lot of things right. It'll be very interesting. Isn't Norvell's current contract like 76 million or something along those lines? It is. It's a lot of money. That's why I don't think it's going to be full fledged. He's the fourth best odds to be fired. But the concern level, if they don't turn it around next year, going into that 2026 season, that's where I think you really start to see the 2025 offseason will be very, very important for Mike Norvell in his time at Tallahassee. Florida State falls to SMU completely. Great stuff for the Mustangs. We love that program. Friends of the program. We have a lot of friends inside that program, inside those buildings, and we really appreciate what they've obviously helped us with. In any way, form and fashion, it's cool to see them succeed. Got a good people over there. Let's talk about Friday night's game. Absolute nuts. Miami survives. You remember when I said earlier, when you're a title contending or title worthy team, each and every single year we've seen these data points. When you're that, you have to go win an ugly game. Regardless of what the box score says, if you've got more points at the end of the game when the time expires than the other team, it's all that matters. Miami was able to do that on Friday. Miami was able to outlast in the craziest turn of events I've ever seen in the football game. Well, I thought so. Then we obviously watched the Alabama-Georgia game. Miami found a way. And when you're that title-worthy team, there come those ugly game tests. Miami passed, Ole Miss didn't. Is Miami different? The head scratching of a decision last year against Georgia Tech, is that rear its ugly head again? I don't know. But what I will tell you, Cam Ward's a legitimate threat. Xavier Restrepo, and they've got some weapons on the outside. Damian Martinez is a heck of a running back, and they've got some defensive pieces. We take a look back at what our friends over at Bet Online say in terms of betting odds. Miami is the odds-on favorite to win the ACC title at plus 100. Clemson plus 265. Louisville plus 600. SMU at plus 800. This is the year if you're Miami. If you don't win it this year, it's not just going to sting, it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt a lot. So Miami survives. They find a way. Virginia Tech, and people joke about this, probably the best 3-loss program in the country. Virginia Tech's a solid team. Very, very solid team, and I like what they've been able to do. Nancy says FSU is sorry they didn't get Cam. Mr. 5112 says hook 'em. Appreciate you tuning in there, Mr. 5112. Kind of back to that for a second. Virginia Tech's just going to be a pesky team. I think that's going to be them the rest of the year. That loss to Vanderbilt obviously kind of reset things for them. They've struggled, but they're going to be a thorn in somebody's side, whether they host them or whether they go to them. We saw that on Saturday. It's hard to win football games. You got kids range from 17 years old, Ryan Williams, to 25 years old, Alan Bowman. It's completely, there's so many factors, there's so many variables in this sport. It's hard to predict. We predict what we think we know, but when it comes down to it, you still got to play the football game on the field. Virginia Tech's going to ruin somebody's season because they're just a pesky bunch. I do like Brent Pry as a head coach. They've got a good defense. Offensively, Kyron Jones has not been what people thought they were, not been what we had heard he might be. And it hasn't worked out. They're still a pesky football team. So Miami survives. That is a massive, massive storyline, obviously heading into the rest of ACC play for them. And then the final storyline we'll take a look at here tonight is Louisville falls to Notre Dame. One, let's give credit to Notre Dame. Marcus Freeman played under Jim Tressel at Ohio State. And Marcus Freeman knows what it means to win. He's a winner. I will tell you this. I absolutely love this Notre Dame team in terms of the physicality they play with. It's not an explosive offense. Mike Denbrock up there has to find some type of combination to open up this offense. But they feel like a team that could bludgeon you to death. That would be my worry when Georgia Tech plays them in Mercedes-Benz here in a couple weeks. But they are impressive, and they scored a big win. Tyler Shuck is a good quarterback. Louisville is a well-coached team, a disciplined football team. This was a really good football game. Notre Dame wins this one. Now, obviously, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't affect where Louisville sits in the ACC race. We talked about that. They're still at plus 600, the third best odds to win the whole thing in the conference. So I like where Louisville sits, but this is more about Notre Dame being a team that just found a way. And on a weekend where teams didn't find a way, I mentioned Miami earlier, I mentioned Ole Miss. I was impressed with that. I was very much impressed with their ability to find a way to go win a football game and leave saying, yeah, we got things we need to clean up. But I've said this multiple times, folks. It's a much better mood. You're in a much better mood when you get to the film room on Sunday or Monday, whatever you do. It feels a lot better to be sipping on that coffee on Sunday morning, knowing that, yeah, we got things to fix, but we got to win and we got a dub. There's another tally in the win column. So I absolutely love that. I think that's going to be something that's really, really kind of a hallmark, because a lot of people were kind of ready. We talked about this on last week's show. Notre Dame lost this game. They're probably out of the playoff race. Still, playoff hopes are still alive there for the Cardinals. Or for Notre Dame. Louisville obviously falls. It doesn't affect their ACC ranking and what they need to do, but, once again, shows this team can be beat. Maxwell says, I ate the Falcons yesterday. Shout out. Nothing like living in the state of Louisiana and seeing the Falcons get a big win. I was repping the Bijan Robinson jersey. They're on Sunday. It's big time Timmy Jim. College football, kind of week 5 reactions and my takes, my thoughts. Hope you liked it. Hope you had a good time. Once again, Ralph Leary, Will Mannis couldn't be here tonight. Ralph working. Will's internet's completely terrible. But it is what it is. We appreciate you tuning in. All 100 of you watching live, we appreciate it. Share with your friends. Like the channel. Subscribe. If you're watching over on X, make sure you give us a follow, myself, or the Crowded Booth account, and head over to the YouTube channel. Join the Discord. Join College Football Conversation. We talk about it each and every single day. A couple programming notes for you to know what we have coming up this week. Tomorrow night, we continue with Talking Tuesdays, opening up the phone lines where I talked a lot tonight, but we get to hear from you, the fans, for a solid hour. That show starts at 7:30, runs till 8:30 Central, 8:30 to 9:30 Eastern. We'll open up the phone lines. Make sure you be a part of that. It's going to be a lot of fun for us to talk college football with you. Tuesday also, we're going to have a Behind Enemy Lines podcast episode for you Georgia Tech fans as Georgia Tech faces Duke in a very important contest. That'll be out tomorrow afternoonish. And then Wednesday, back with a Week 6 preview. Thursday, a Duke Georgia Tech preview. And obviously Saturday, a reaction show for you Georgia Tech fans as well. But college football always on here on the Crowded Booth YouTube channel. So make sure you tune in. Make sure you give us a subscribe. And make sure you like the channel as well. We appreciate each and every single one of you for tuning in. My name is Bryce Koon. Shout out to our sponsors, Bet Online. Brutal week for myself and Ralph in the best bets of the week. Will gets in the win column. He's 1-5. The march back continues. The March of Manus. What if we call it that? The Manus March. That's what we're going to be calling it to see if Will can come all the way back. Get that hashtag started, and we'll catch you next time here on the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.